Welcome to Pixelated episode 88. I'm your host, Will Saddleberg. This week, Damien and I are joined by Ben Schoon to talk all about the announcement and subsequent immediate delay of Android 17's first beta. Has this ever happened before? How did it happen? Why did it happen? I'm recording this intro just as Android 17 Beta 1 is finally starting to ship, but I promise we still deliver a very interesting behind the scenes before discussing what we actually expect out of Android upgrades these days. Then we turn our attention to Samsung for a look at everything we know about the Galaxy S26 lineup ahead of its now confirmed February 25th announcement date. All that and more starts right now.
So we should, guys, be talking about Android 17 today, Android 17 Beta 1. Google decided to pull the plug on that at the last minute, which is a little bit disappointing because now we have nothing to talk about in terms of the update. But we have a special guest with us. I want to kind of get your thoughts on this, Ben, because this has kind of happened to us previously only once before. We've had a delayed update, and I think I know which version it is. I'm going to work out what you think it might be and whether I'm right or wrong on this one as well, because I might actually be wrong about it.
Oh, version that was delayed at the last minute. I don't think we've ever had it like this, where it was, we got the embargo, as all publications do, and then it just got pulled out at the last minute. I don't think I've ever seen that. At least where it, the time passed and then we were told it's not coming.
There is certainly, and either of you can stop me if I should cut this, but there have certainly been times, and Google is not the exception here. This is across the entire industry, across every industry, where embargo times have been shifted or delayed. Like that is fairly commonplace. I'm not saying it happens every product launch, but we're no stranger to. And again, this is not specific to Google. I'm making up an example, but even as late as 20 minutes before an embargo lifting, I have certainly from a company gotten a let's shift this embargo thing. And so it was a little frustrating to see several people online being like, oh, all these publications published too early. They really screwed up. I can't believe they want clicks so bad. So peek behind the curtain, since this is a a podcast and we can be a little more free with it. There are lots of times where Google will set the embargo time, but then the for Android beta whatever, and then the updates actually go out 25 minutes later. The files are not up when our news posts go up, which is fine. Obviously, all of us are waiting to download it. So it's usually us in Slack, being like, is it out yet? Refresh. Is it out yet? With this, it was, dragging on a little bit long until we finally realized it's not happening today. Google has told us it is now no longer happening today. And Ben, to your point, I can't think of another time that's ever happened.
I don't think we've had it with, okay. Let me get into some specifics here. I'm trying to rack my brain because I don't know how many iterations I've done of Android like this now. I personally think, and I'm now worried that I'm wrong about this. I'm going to say it anyway. I think it was Android 15 Developer Preview 2 was the last update, which was supposed to come out on a day and it wasn't. And it came out on a Thursday instead of a Wednesday, I think.
Yeah,
someone's going to quote me if I'm wrong.
That sounds familiar.
And I remember the preamble to that was that there was some code commits that basically said it was going to come out on, say, the 2 days preceding it, and it didn't.
Yeah.
So it's not quite the same. But to kind of give a little bit of insight into this one, it's almost like you're gearing up for it and nothing happens and it's a little bit deflating. But at the same time, I can completely understand why Google might have done this. I mean, let's talk a little bit of background to it.
Yeah.
We just had, and I'm going to get this wrong because I'm really bad with QPR numbers. Is it QPR 2 beta 2.1 or QPR 3? Is it 3 or is it 2? Whichever one came out, it came out the day prior to that.
And QPR 3 beta 2.1.
Yeah. Too many numbers.
Not
it's like a phone number. It's like a phone number at this point. So I do wonder if that update has either quashed some bugs that were potentially in 17 beta 1, which we don't know because it's not available, or it introduced some bugs that then have to be squashed again because they're like, oh, we're aware of these bugs that have appeared. Like I'm endlessly fascinated on how Google is managing all of this, because technically the team is smaller, but it's more tight knit, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know. It feels like they could have had a disaster on their hands if they released this. You wouldn't pull it at the last minute if that was the case, right? If everything's prepared and everything's the road is set and you're going to be driving down that highway.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously speculation to a certain degree, but like this doesn't happen. This doesn't happen unless there's a bug, right? Like that is like 100% of the reason this would happen is that they discover some issue that cannot be fixed in time, and that they don't feel, despite the fact that it is early software and there are like anyone installing it should be aware that there are going to be issues, because they've spotted it. It's obviously high priority enough that they don't want to push this out to users, which is the right decision, to be clear.
Oh,
like, I don't think Google has done anything wrong here other than
yeah.
Like confuse people a little bit, because it was so weird where it was like, we got the QPR3 beta 2.1. God, that's a lot of
so many letters and numbers.
A lot of syllables.
Words, so many words.
Yeah, exactly. QPR3 beta 2.1. And then like genuinely like an hour later, they were like, by the way, also Android 17 beta 1 is like around the corner. And I think confusion even started there, where people were like, oh, but didn't you just push this update? And then like the next day every Android blog, every tech blog goes live with like Android 17 day. Welcome to Android 17 beta 1 day. And then an hour later, everybody's like, psych, just kidding. It's not. And so I can understand why there was a lot of confusion about like, didn't they just push this QPR3 beta? Like, why would they also be launching Android 17 this week? And Damien, to your point, I think your theory makes a lot of sense in that like perhaps they either fixed something or introduced some kind of incompatibility issue between these two versions when they push this QPR3 update, which happens. Like, and so now we're kind of left in a waiting game where we know this update exists. We know a little bit about it because we published our embargoed materials at the embargo time. And we're just waiting for the actual OTA files to eventually appear when Google feels they're ready.
Yeah, I mean, let's expand upon that a little bit, because we've had some leaks, haven't we? We talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but we haven't had Ben's thoughts on it, because I think you are one of the people, a bit like me, who is vehement. I mean, Will is as well, when we talked about it in a previous episode. We are vehemently against liquid glass elements being introduced and stuff. And we know, like, I guess it's system level blurs, which is very different, but we can't help draw comparisons with liquid glass, because it's almost like we're trying to say, don't do this, please, because you're ruining the goodwill of the Android community. We don't want iOS. We want Android to be Android. Like, what do you think? What do you think of the stuff that you've seen leaked so far? Because there's been a little bit, not tons, but a little bit of Android 17 out there.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, transparency and blur is not really a problem. My issue with iOS and liquid glass is more so that it's such a dominant part of the design language, that not only are you making everything transparent and blurred, but you're also making everything harder to see by doing that. Whereas at least what we've seen from Android 17 so far is like, it's blurred, but it's not blurred to a point where it's an issue. It's just a visual change, and it's not necessarily a bad one. I do feel like Google should not try to follow that trend, because, they actually have their own thing and it's nice, versus Samsung and everyone else.
Literally everybody else to some degree.
Let's get into that a little bit, because I want to rack your brain about this. I know we spoke about it privately on Slack, but I want you to get this on the record now. How do you feel that other OEMs, Android OEMs specifically, how do you think they're handling the fact that we have Apple's vision of a mobile OS, which rightly or wrongly has dominated how everybody else does their stuff. Yeah. And now we have Material 3 Expressive, which is Google's, I think, very unique, and it's a genuinely fantastic take on what a mobile OS should be. Why do you think that over the last 6 months specifically, and I'm doing hand signals, so you can, sorry, audio listeners out there, which is all of you, you can't see me doing this. We're having this mesh of ideologies, but iOS is winning out even more so than it probably has done in the past 4 or 5 years. Like, everybody seems to be looking at Apple more than they have in the 5 years preceding these. It's so odd to me. I'm fascinated to hear what you think, Ben.
Well, yeah, I mean, at this point, Apple is not just dominant, but like they are commanding the mobile space in general. Last year was the, kind of cemented that, Apple is now the biggest smartphone manufacturer on the planet by a good margin. It's they rightly live in every other smartphone manufacturer's heads. So it's important to think about how you compare when you're developing a product, developing new software. And I think Google looked at that and said, how can we do it differently? How can we do it better? And they went their own path and created something that's pretty good. And they did it at a good time because, Apple released liquid glass and it has not been super well received. There's a lot of people who like it, but there's a lot of people who don't. Whereas, Material Theory Expressive, I think, was pretty well received by everyone.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a strange one, isn't it? Because you would think that the lukewarm response to what Apple has done over the past 3 or 4 years, and then now they've gone in with liquid glass with this huge update, and then we then have an issue with basically every other OEM thinking, okay, that's the right way to do things, even though iOS users don't like liquid glass. Like that to me is insane. Like why would you then, effectively everyone's doubling down on what someone else is doing, copy their homework. Whereas Google is like, copy our homework, please. We're literally giving you the building blocks to make something your own. And they're like, nah, it's fine. We'll do our own thing. Because Android 17 it's going to change things again, isn't it? It's going to change things up again.
But yeah, like I said, Google looked at Apple and said, how can we be different? How can we be better? Samsung, Oppo, everyone else said, we need to do that now.
It's trend chasing.
Yeah, it is very much. They are trying to chase Apple and
100%
just chase Apple's customers because they think that works, even though
and they think Apple
it doesn't.
Apple sets the trend. It doesn't matter if it's even going to be unpopular. Like they don't even. I think a lot of these companies, like up to and including Samsung, like just kind of hazard a guess, like put it on black. This is going to be popular. Like it doesn't even like. Apple's track record over the last 20 years in these companies' eyes is so flawless that like it doesn't matter if they have the occasional whiff. Like we'll follow their lead, and more times than not, we'll just be right there as an alternative. Regardless of where whether or not this is being sold in North America or Europe or China, like we will be there as a similar alternative with a slightly different feature set or a slightly different design or a different price, right? Like we'll find our little niche where we can attack Apple from underneath and then be like, and you get 90% of the same experience, which obviously isn't necessarily true and or is not what like an Android shopper would or should be looking for. Like it's such a weird, I'm not surprised that some companies do it. I am surprised that essentially everyone but Google to a certain degree have skinned Android to look like modern iOS. It varies based on OEM, but every OEM has at least a little bit of it.
Yeah, I obviously we don't have Android 17 yet in our hands, but obviously from what we've seen already, it does look like Google's just leaning into their own thing a little bit more.
Yeah,
which
the
is
blur
good.
I don't think takes away from that at all.
No,
like we talked about it with Abner. It feels a little bit like change for sake of change's sake. Like I don't get anything out of it, but I don't think it takes away anything either, which is fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Like if they want to do that, then I'm not going to notice it after day 2. You know what I mean? Like it's fine.
I mean, in terms of like feature set that you'd love to see from this, I mean, we don't expect major changes in Android 17 anyway in terms of like functionality, but like what would be the dream? Because I've been bullish on like integrating some, if you're going to have AI, then at least let us have tools for like a little bit like what Nothing are doing, where you can kind of maybe do things like make your own widgets, all that kind of stuff. I think if anyone's in the best position to do it, surely it's Google with Gemini leading the charge. I do wonder what you guys think. What would be the dream addition to Android 17, or are you a little bit over it, like a lot of people tend to be with smartphones nowadays?
Do you have an easy answer, Ben?
I mean, Damien, I think you're right. I would love to see Google do something like what Nothing's doing with the essential apps. I think Nothing actually is onto a pretty good idea with that, although I'm not, after playing with it earlier this week, I'm not super sold on their interpretation of it. But it's also early days and, they don't have the same resources. But, being able to build your own home screen widget, and, I guess you can call that an app, is a cool idea. And I would love to see Google do things like that with AI to where, you can build your own functionality for your phone. I think that would be a cool idea. And it's something that Android has weirdly been lacking for a long time, even though with Apple, we've seen the, what do we call those Siri automations?
Shortcuts.
Are they powered by Siri? I didn't realize.
It's a part of Siri.
Siri shortcuts, I think, is technically the full name. But they're annoying to use, but they are weirdly deep for customization.
That's like the one feature I've seen in mobile for the past, 5 years where I'm like, how does Android not have its own version of this? So I would love to see Google take that, because we've seen
Samsung has one, right? I think Samsung has a similar version, but we have not seen it built into it first.
Also through Bixby.
Yeah, oh my God. Well, that's fine. Nobody talks about it. Sorry to Bixby fans, all four of you. It's one of those things where it's like the last decade of Android development has really been me going up to Google and being like, okay, I don't know what I want from this device. Like, can you show me what, or from this operating system? Like, I don't know what's next because this is modern and mature, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And so anything that I would request would be like a big swing. Like, I would love to see Google or really anybody take a crack at like rethinking the home screen. Like, I'm not saying like dramatically different, but like similar to the AI widgets thing, I do think there is space in, especially in a generative AI landscape where like you could play around a little bit more with the concept of what a home screen is supposed to be. You could probably dig up some of the ideas that like Microsoft was playing with what was there? It was Metro at one point, but they're the live tiles, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's space there to like rethink some of like, not dramatically, but like rebuild maybe a more useful, personalized home experience, but like short of big swings like that, which wouldn't be announced as part of this beta anyway, that would be at I/O. I don't know what to ask for from Google because I feel like my smartphone needs are met these days.
Yeah, mobile operating systems are mature now.
Exactly.
We're never going to get back to major changes. It's always going to be based on apps, based on updates.
Yeah.
Kind of, I think the Google TV model shows us the future of this, which is where we get the updates that matter through app updates, and then we get the system level stuff that just happens in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do wonder what the long-term integration is. And I agree with both of you in terms of like the home screen and being it, and further to my own point a little bit is that if you had the ability to, and I don't like the term prompt, I don't know what it is, like you create a menu for yourself almost, if that makes sense. You say, okay, this is how I want this to work. This is how I want this to work. And it does go back to the shortcuts example you gave a little bit, Ben. I think that if we had opportunities to have automations that run better rather than having to, and I love Tasker, the application, but the actual threshold for you knowing what you're doing and getting tasks running automatically or like with a button or with a widget or whatever it is would be kind of cool to have that at a system level. And I know that Gemini would potentially make it easier for normal people to approach them. I do wonder as well what will happen with customization, because customization feels like one of those things that's been really neglected in general in Android.
Yeah.
I know that launchers have done a lot of heavy lifting, but we've seen this like kind of receding of launchers over the last few years, haven't we? Like the biggest players in the space are leaving. Like there's no development going on for is it Nova? No, I think Nova or launcher has gone.
Nova's been sold or
Nova
right?
is like Nova is like on renewed life support because it was purchased by another company that wants to kind of revive it, but their idea of reviving it is not changing much and putting ads in the free version. So we'll see.
Revive, monetize, synonyms,
it's kind of,
really.
It's in my book, it's kind of dead, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, like because there's more of an onus on the brands to be looking at what they're doing for their default home experiences to give you the tools to kind of, I guess not replicate, but at least offer some of them. And obviously you can go and do something like Niagara Launcher, and that's fine. Like that's completely different to anything that we've already seen before.
And that's sort of what I think about when I'm like, I think there is space to be a little bit more experimental, because I love Niagara. I think Niagara is not something I'm using all the time. And part of that is just that you can't really review a device using Niagara. Like you need to use the like stock software experience that people are going to get out of the box, in my opinion. But like when I'm not reviewing stuff, I love going to Niagara. I think it feels so clean and modern and smart about how it's presenting notifications and apps to you in a way that like a standard grid just kind of can't replicate. I know it's not for everybody, but when I say like, I would love to see some like personalized home screen experiences that you could kind of use AI to help customize. Like Niagara's sort of, and not that Niagara has an AI element, but Niagara's sort of what I'm thinking about like there is space here to experiment.
Yeah, but this is the thing. Like, are we going to see? We're kind of reiterating the fact that we're not expecting this from Android 17.
No, not at
this
all.
Stage.
This is going to be like very straightforward changes, like small little visual elements. Lots of back end stuff. Like this is going to be a modern Android update. Yeah, we are speculating about something. We are making a wish list. Apologies to the listener.
If I'm being completely honest, I hate wish lists. But what else can we really tell you about Android 17 apart from the fact that there's going to be some extra system level blurs here and there? More of the same is what we're expecting. Google has confirmed as well that I think one of the most interesting things about this is in their announcement before they then didn't push the update is that the Canary channel is now officially the developer preview. Yeah. So traditional Android developer previews are done. Canary's the way this is going to be done in future. It just means they can iterate faster, which I think is a really, really sensible move. I think we've alluded to it before anyway in this pod that does make the most sense now that they can kind of build out these little features on a almost weekly and monthly basis is fantastic for Android. It's going to be great for us. At the same time, it means that when we get these, in air quotes, big updates, there's not going to be much there. But it does change the kind of the complexion of how Google does updates for Android moving forward. QPR's probably got more to say as well, which is another fascinating aspect. But yeah, it's always a good time when we're talking about Android updates. It's just a shame we don't have one to dive into properly today. But we've had some other news that kind of has been pushed to the side a little bit, but it's still really big news, especially for this industry. We now have officially a date for Unpacked, where we're going to see the Galaxy S26 series, most likely. It seems as though that is the trio of devices we're expecting: S26, S26 Plus, and S26 Ultra. Let's get into this a little bit because I have some really tempered expectations this year. I know that. Myself and Ben are Samsung users. You are you a Z Fold?
Yep, that is still my daily driver.
Insane that you're still using that today, but it is one of their best products of the last few years. So
to be fair, I did also pay for it.
Fair enough. But let's get into Unpacked. Let's get into what we think is going to happen. It's still taking place in San Francisco, I take it, Ben?
Yep, it'll take place in San Francisco on February 25th at 10 a.m. local time. Which
kind of is par for the course at this point in time, right? That seems to be their home base almost of S-series launches now. I have to say, in terms of like incremental updates, we've seen a lot of those the last few years. Yeah. We haven't really talked necessarily a huge deal about S26 here on the podcast, but I feel like with the S25 Ultra specifically, it belied how little of an upgrade it was of the S24. So I'm kind of hoping that continues with the S26, but I actually have really, really tempered my own expectations. There is so little to kind of really get our teeth into. I don't know how you guys, are you excited? I don't know. Do we get excited about product launches nowadays?
Well, see, so originally I was kind of excited about the Galaxy S26 because, the past 4 generations have been just kind of refining. The S25 mainly thanks to One UI 8, did feel like quite a big little jump. But ultimately, it was just another refinement.
Yeah.
But the initial rumors about the S26 were exciting. They was going to have new features, big new design changes, a lot of overdue upgrades to the battery, to the charging, to the cameras. It was going to have Qi 2. It was a very big update. And then it kind of just all went away. And I put a piece up about this recently about how Samsung had a bunch of upgrades in planned, and then they killed it because the iPhone was cheap. And that's really all it came down to.
It does feel like, I mean, this is not taken away from anything that Samsung is probably going to do, because they know how to make a good hardware. They know how to make a good device now. The top tier S Ultra devices stand toe to toe with the iPhone in almost every single department in lots of ways. But it almost feels like, how long can Samsung run on? It's a little bit like borrowed time, isn't it? Like, it's like everybody else in the space is catching them and surpassing them in certain areas. I find it very, very difficult to believe that a phone that is 8 out of 10 in every single area, which I have no doubt that every S series device has been like that for a while, can continue. You're going to have one standout. Do we think we're going to have a standout this time around? We don't.
No,
I mean,
no,
absolutely not.
Because the smallest 25 or the the smallest 26 is essentially going to be what we saw last year. The S26 Plus is like rushed to market, like literally what we like, as little change as possible, essentially. And then the Ultra was looking like the boring one of the three, and is now weirdly maybe the most exciting, which is wild. I don't think there's another smartphone manufacturer that is as resistant to change as Samsung is. They really coast on the legacy of their hardware, and certainly the dominance they had in the smartphone market throughout the 2010s. But, outside of when they're really pushed to it, you saw this with the Z Fold 7, when they're really pushed by a rival to they really fall behind the pack, which I think they had in foldables. I think we can all agree on that. At the very least, they were no longer the leader in a market that they created. That is when Samsung finally snaps back into it and makes the changes they need to stay as just above the level of competitive they need. But their smartphone, non-foldable smartphones, are so stagnant, and I don't know, short of everybody switching to Pixel, or everybody, every existing Samsung user switching to Pixel or Apple or whatever, I don't know what would spur them back to really trying new things. And to their credit, well, to their 25% credit, they sort of tried a new thing with the Edge last year, which was a response to Apple rumors, but they did try it and nobody cared, and they didn't really advertise it, and it was too expensive. So I again, they're getting a small amount of credit, but I just don't know. It really does come down to I don't even think I'm asking for a new thing. I am really asking for just then don't bother making a new phone. I would rather see prices reduced and models held, year over year, and obviously that's not going to be good for their bottom line, but it would be good for the consumer. But at the same time, if they're not spending who knows how much R&D on this boring Galaxy S26 lineup, that's savings that they could pass on to the consumer realistically. They won't, but they could. I don't know. I find it very frustrating, and it is weird as a hobbyist and an enthusiast and somebody who's lived in this space since I was a teenager to be stop making phones. But to a certain extent, if changes are going to be so slow, then I would rather them, skip a generation, or maybe do 18th month cycles like we've seen Samsung, not currently, but previously do with their tablets. Lean into that, lean into the slowed down, but now, these are big changes that you're going to feel generation over generation. I think that's good for the end consumer. and the environment and so on and so on. I just think it's positive for almost everybody, but perhaps shareholders.
I fully agree. And also, like, this isn't just a problem with their flagships. I've been using the Galaxy A17 recently, which is
that one's truly ridiculous.
Yeah, no. So that's like, it's one of their cheapest phones. It is year over year the A1 whatever, 14, 15, 16 is the most popular Android phone on the planet, like bar none.
Yeah.
The 5G one that they sell in the US is like unchanged in the past 3 generations. They have very, very subtly tweaked the design. They've, swapped out some camera sensors, but like it's still running the same chip as it was 3 years ago. It's still running the same amount of RAM.
Yeah, that's painful, isn't it, for someone buying?
It wasn't very good 3 years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't very good 3 years ago. Now it's like, I'm going back and forth with Samsung about this thing. Like, it is borderline unusable. I think, Will, you were talking about reels and shorts and stuff on a sideload recently.
Yeah.
But like, that's what most people do on their phones now.
Yeah.
And like, I opened Instagram on this thing and I'm trying to scroll through reels and the Wi-Fi keeps disconnecting and the video keeps lagging. And it's like, it's unusable. And that's their most popular phone. That's the one people are buying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, yeah, they're gonna. They do need to, like, as much as we're like, well, what's left to change on phones? They need to innovate a little bit or bring something to the table, because like, I do think Samsung in particular is at risk of like damaging its reputation if they do this long enough where they're like, we don't need to change anything. Like, we can just relaunch the same Galaxy A phone over and over and over again. And like, people will walk into, either a prepaid carrier or Walmart or Target or whatever, wherever it's being sold. Cause usually these are sold in prepaid markets. Like, they will just buy it. And it's kind of the same for the S series. Like your average, like, flagship Android user is just going to walk into Verizon and they have an S23 and they're going to be like, my battery's bad, and buy an S26. But eventually I do think that people are going to be like, consumers are fickle, right? Like they're going to be like, well, why am I paying $1,200 for the thing I had before? Like, I don't need to like shell out this money for an experience that is essentially the same as what I bought 3 years ago. That doesn't, and like, I do think that's when you get wandering eyes to like, well, then I don't know. I guess at least the iPhone is a little different, or at least the Pixel's a little different. Like, that's a danger for Samsung. And I don't know if it will hit them this year, but like, they do need to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I think just looking at the A17 again, that is the baseline for most people's introduction to Android, and that is rightly or wrongly how people view the platform. Yeah. If it's your entry into it and it's laggy and it's not a good experience, it does tarnish the entire industry. Every single phone that is powered by Android is affected by the cheapest of phones in the market because they are the most popular. If that is the single most popular Android phone on the planet, then whether or not Samsung think that they do, they genuinely have a duty to make sure that that product is as good as it can be at that price point, because effectively what you're saying is to the consumer, you need to put money down to get a better experience. Yes, you can get that, but they won't trust Samsung to do so because they've had a bad experience with their cheapest device in the market lineup. And then the market everywhere else is significantly affected because nobody wants to be associated with an Android phone. And at the top end of the market, it comes full circle, really, because when we look at the S26 and the S26 Plus, based upon the leaked specifications we have for those now, those phones have not changed since the S22 series. All that they've done is put a new chip in there, which is fine if you just want a new chip. But if you don't get camera improvements, your display doesn't change all that drastically, the experience is still the same. Like, there is no reason for anyone to be looking at it. And I'm kind of the opposite with some people say that you want to see a big visual change from the hardware. I don't mind that Samsung stuck to a kind of I wouldn't say stand out. It kind of blends into the background a bit more, but it is a significantly Samsung look that they have. It's clean, it's consistent. They have the camera bar at the back. That's great. I don't have a problem with that. But not making the changes internally just because you think that,
that's my point. They could make changes. Like the camera, I agree. Like just the camera alone, I think would be enough if they were just pushing on hardware, because processing is not Samsung's strong suit. I think the three of us can agree on that, right? Like it is, as far as the big three in the US, I think their processing is the one I like the least out of Samsung, Google, and Apple. And I fault their processing for lots of the motion issues I've had with taking, the shutter speed issues I've had with taking photos on Samsung devices in the past. I mean, I've literally watched clear images post processing become blurry because like whatever happened behind the scenes like got screwed up. And so, yeah, if they were just pushing all in on hardware and being like, okay, sometimes our processing is a little wonky, but like we've got the first 1-inch sensor in the US or whatever, because they make a 1-inch sensor, or their camera arm makes a 1-inch sensor. I think, larger batteries, like all of this stuff, they could kind of chase and be like, sure, it looks like the phone you're upgrading from, but it's a 1500 milliamp per hour battery higher, like the capacity is that much higher, and it's got faster charging, and it's got a much better camera sensor in it. Like they could do this while keeping the same design. They don't want to do any of it. They don't want to change any, like bare minimum on every front, hardware, designs, like all of it. It's going to be a problem. And Damien, to your point about like them doing this in the low end too, like the low end Android experience of the early 2010s is one of the things I hold responsible for Apple's dominance in the US. It basically, like, people bought low end Android phones as their first smartphone, especially teenagers. In the early 2010s, their first smartphone was some low-end Motorola thing. And this is before the G series got kind of good. This is before the G series in general. Low-end, Motorola, Samsung, whatever. They use it. It's bad. They're like, this sucks. They switch to iOS because they hear the iPhone's good. It doesn't matter that they're paying 3 times the price and there are comparable Android phones. That's just what they've heard, and they've experienced bad Android. And then you get iMessage lock-in. They get locked into iMessage and we're done, right? Like that's how that goes. Versus in Europe, where at the very least, WhatsApp made it easier to switch back to Android if you decided to get a flagship Android phone. I just worry that Samsung is like falling into this trap again, where we're making really bad low-end Android phones now because we don't want to upgrade the hardware. And it's going to be a problem, I think.
No, and to pull this back to Google, I think that's where Google is really far ahead right now, which is one, on the flagship side, they're not necessarily reinventing their phone every year like some people expect. They're making quality improvements each generation. Pixel 9 to Pixel 10, there were actual meaningful improvements.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even mentioned that, like, the new rumor, like, one of the only things we could grasp onto with the S26 was like, well, at least it's getting G2. Like,
yeah,
nope.
and that's just not happening.
It has Qi 2 speeds, though. It just won't.
It has. Magnet. So it is, from what I've seen, it is Qi 2.2.1 certified, which is the same spec level as the Pixel 10 Pro XL. So it can do 25 watt or 20 watt on the smaller ones, but it requires a case to do it. There are no magnets built in, so it has the faster speeds. It just can't do that.
And I'm much more about the magnets. I don't really care about the speeds. I want it for magnetic accessories.
I agree.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, you could argue.
Crazy.
I'm guessing you could argue that people put their phone in a case anyway. But the downside to that is that you are then putting the choice on the consumer to do so. As in, if I cannot imagine that putting the magnets in the back of the phone would have made too much difference in terms of thickness and all that kind of stuff. The Pixel 10 has proven that it can be done. It's really disappointing when Samsung does this, because you could hear the complaints last year. There was lots of lots of people complaining about the devices not having it then, and they still had Qi 2 in the S25 series.
Yep,
am I right in thinking
they
that?
were also Qi 2 certified, still requiring the case. So they were planning on doing that. That's what the original leak showed us.
Yeah.
But because the iPhone was cheaper than they thought, they just threw everything out that they thought was going to add cost. It's ridiculous. But that's what it is. But like I said, Google, I think, is making better choices there, because they're making these meaningful improvements. And then on the low end, they're also not making phones that are so dirt cheap that they have to compromise to this level. And to Samsung's credit, it's $200 phone. Like, I'm going to circle back to that. It's a $200 phone. I don't expect it to be good. But I also expect.
Yeah, but you should. There's a level of quality, though, right?
I think
in 2026,
I think a $200 phone should be usable for basic day-to-day stuff, and should not feel like a drag to do that. I think the Moto G does that. Even I used a Moto G Power recently. It's $100 more expensive. It has double the RAM, which is a big difference. But it also has a new up-to-date chip. that phone gets rid of Android updates. Like it gets like, I think, one OS update. But it's a usable phone for a very cheap amount of money. The A17 is, we're going to update this thing for 6 OS updates. But it's unusable. If it's this bad now, and it's not running Android 16 out of the box, by the way. It was Android 15 when I pulled it out, and then I updated it. I think. Either way, if it's bad now on Android 16, what is it going to be like on Android 20?
There's a lot. No. I think there's a lot to ponder with how Samsung are handling those kind of updates as well, because like there has to come a point, or there must be a clash internally with the people developing the software and the people running it on the hardware, because they will have to do some level of QA and testing on it. They must know, like you've alluded to it there, like if it's borderline unusable now, by Android 20, if they even get that, even if they even bother updating it, like they might wait 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is down the line.
Those updates take a while.
It's a heel dragging that I think is been the most frustrating, and it kind of led me to write a piece about it, and why I'm still I think maybe being an idealist a little bit. I'm optimistic for the S26, but I know I'm already disappointed. I know that, but then again, to contradict myself entirely, I complained about Samsung last year, and the S25 Ultra, I was obsessed with it. It's one of the best.
It's a great piece of hardware.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. Hardware that carries it.
It was I found it much more comfortable to hold than the S24. Again, it's not like these are bad phones, and I don't really think anybody makes a bad flagship anymore. I think the worst you can be is like a little mediocre, and I fear that Samsung is trending into that space just out of sheer repetition. Like it's just.
I think it's fear. I think there's a lot of fear behind Samsung. In the last few years.
Every smartphone to a certain degree feels, maybe not the Pixel, but for the most part, every smartphone these days feels designed by committee, but no one is more guilty of that than Samsung, in part because all of their non-foldable devices share the same exact design. Like from the A17 up to the upcoming Galaxy S26, they all kind of look the same.
Do you think it's a bad thing though? I'm unsure.
I think it's a bad thing when you don't have something striking like the Pixel. Like I think the Pixel's camera bar and like the iPhone's camera bar now, like everybody's has a camera bar, really helps bring about and Oppo I think is really good at that. Lots of the Chinese brands are also really good at that. And Samsung is just like, we've got this triple lens that we think is kind of iconic. I mean, they've used the triple lens as their like teaser so many times. They really find it to be their iconic design, but I just to me it is the most generic representation of a 2020 smartphone is 3 vertically aligned camera lenses.
Yeah, it does feel generic, but it also does feel like them. I personally don't have an issue with them keeping the same design across everything. Again, my issue is that like they refuse to do meaningful improvements. And again, that's where I think Google is, really stepping ahead. Is that they're showing the rest of the Android space, hey, you can make meaningful improvements without reinventing your phone every year.
Yeah, we do say after myself, Damien, and Abner spent like 30 minutes ranting about the Pixel 10a being the same phone last week.
That is fair.
Yeah, at least it's looking like the same phone. Like who knows what that spec sheet's going to be. But certainly us looking at those teasers and being like, oh, they removed the camera ring.
I think, it kind of, at the moment, there is a lot of things going on, and we talked about it briefly when we were discussing iPhone 17 earlier, if you can remember that half an hour ago. It definitely feels as though Samsung is reverting to bad habits. I think they're definitely looking at what Apple is doing more so than they ever have done in the last few years, and it's like I think it was you, Will, who said that they've experimented with devices, S26 Edge, to get ahead of Apple, but in years gone by, they would have just made it. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. And then that can be the mistakes that they made or the progress that they made can be then utilized to make the S series bigger. It feels like the S series is not the tip of the spear that it once was. It's almost like the spear itself has dulled. There's maybe a bit of rust there. And it's like when you don't have as many competitors that truly at the top end in global markets, it does feel as though Samsung are a little bit frozen in time, and maybe that's why they're looking at what Apple is doing more
100%.
More broadly than they have done in the last 4, at least in the 4 or 5 years. and the S series always felt like a huge deal. It is still a huge deal, and that's why we're talking about it. So
yeah, I feel like I've ranted a lot, so I'll leave it at this. Maybe a slightly the only reason I'm maybe sounding like I'm complaining a lot about this is because I know there are a lot of like very talented, very intelligent, designers and engineers and just employees in general across Samsung. Like it is out of a place of love and expectation that I am complaining about the current track that they're on, because I know they're capable of more innovation than this. I think they showed it throughout the tail end, the back half of the 2010s and a little bit into the 2020s. And every now and then you still see it. I think the trifold was a smart play by them. I think it's an interesting device. I think the Z Fold 7 was like an excellent year-over-year upgrade. And if you upgraded from like a Z Fold 4, you had an incredible experience. Like it's there. I just want to see it more often.
Tying everything together and making sure it's all aligned at the same time. I think that kind of covers Unpacked. February 25th, is it?
February
Sorry,
25th.
Ben? February 25th. A couple of weeks' time, we will be all over that when the event is held in San Francisco. We'll give you our thoughts on devices when we get to have an opportunity to have a play with them. We've been a bit negative, but I'm always excited by new hardware. It is what it is, even if it isn't much of a change. I just hope that they can maybe take a little bit of a battering that they've had recently and maybe utilize that for the next generation, because it feels like obviously we're not going to see any changes now, like a couple of weeks out ahead of launch. But yeah, at least based on leaks, it doesn't look all that promising if you're looking for a huge upgrade. But no phone has really done that in the last few years, apart from on the foldable space. But just want to say thanks, guys, for joining me. It's always fantastic. Abner will be back next week as usual, but it's been a pleasure to have you, Ben. You're always welcome back on the podcast as always.
Yeah, it was fun.
Make sure you go check out Ben on his socials. I'll get Will to leave that in the show notes. He's the guy who's responsible for that. I mean, I don't know if you want to tell everyone where you can find you, Ben, if that makes it any easier.
I mean, the easy one is the homepage of Google.com.
Yeah, set that up. Okay, right. You can have that home run. Yes, thanks, guys, for joining us. It's been a fantastic episode again, and I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Pixelated, a 9to5 Google podcast. If you enjoyed the show, we ask that you rate and review it on the podcast platform of your choice and help spread the word by sharing the show with friends or on social media. I don't remember the last time I had a clear vision for what I wanted changed on Android. The last probably at least decade has mostly been me being like, okay, Google, tell me what you... Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I'm going to cut that. I shouldn't have said that. I genuinely 2 devices on my desk just lit up. So I got myself with that one. I'm gonna mark that. Hold on a second.
You have to leave it and just bleep it.